Pedalboard Diaries. What we got? We got January 7th. Happy and crappy New Year to all of you who observe the Gregorian calendar. And we're about to talk about this GT-1000CORE for the most part today, and what I've done and some findings, etc. So, got two presets to talk about. First of all, we got this one. This one. Now, drastically different EQ curves. Check it out. And trying to match them is a bit difficult because preset number 1 on here, that's actually bank 2 number 1, which is preset 5 there and preset 6. Pay no attention to the names. I have not named these presets yet. Anyhow, this one is using nothing at all on the MS3, although it might be coloring the sound a little bit. Let me move this microphone. I noticed on my last video when I pointed away from the mic, though the pattern is set to like omnidirectional, my voice would cut out some when I lean down. Let me just adjust this microphone. Okay, so anyhow, there's going to be some tone coloration because I'm going through here. There's an AD converter and DA converter, you know, but there's no effects and the level is set to just 100, you know what I mean? So this is just basically bypassed when I'm using preset 1. So all the sounds you're hearing is coming from the GT-1000CORE's amp modeling. Now when I go to this preset, we've got the EVH 5150 overdrive going into that Mooer radar cab sim and then into there. And I believe, hold on, let me make this fair. I have a reverb on the other preset. I think I turned it off here. Let's turn it back on. Okay. Now they both have a little tiny bit of reverb. Hear that? Here. Very similar. Anyhow, this gives it more of a natural sound. So anywho, now you'll notice the booster, which goes before the EVH 5150, is turned off. And that's because on preset 2, I've got some pre-filtering or boosts or whatever you want to call them before the EVH that I'm doing from the MS3. Now check this out. Let's go over here, put it in. We're going to start editing. Now when I change presets, it doesn't actually, let me turn my volume down. Woo, Lord. This is still on the previous preset because it ignores MIDI program changes while you're in edit mode. I think that's probably a good thing. Anyway, if you look at what I've got going on here. Oh wait, hold on now. I'm learning a little bit more about the old, there we go, OBS. Okay. I'm hoping this will be slightly clearer than when I did a zoom in post in Premiere and After Effects. Man, I'm still seeing some graininess on the dark sections there. And I've got more lights this time. Well, we're still trying to get that fixed, but nonetheless, I hope you can see these screens. I prefer to use the editing right on the screen. I know they come with editors, but then you got long cable runs to the computer. Speaking of which, it's probably not in the shot, but I've got the old adapter here. Now it's just a short, like a few inches adapter that has a right-angled micro USB, so I can set this down into the pedal board that has a slight wall on the side and still connect my long micro USB cable to the GT-1000CORE. I still think that's ridiculous that it's not USB-C, however, at least that's working. And I have no USB hooked up to this, so I'm doing all the editing right in the menus. Anywho, oh hello, there's me. If you look at this distortion, we've got the type clean, I guess it's like a clean boost. Drive 18, tone plus 30, level 74, go to the next page, bottom minus 32. So that's acting sort of like I would use a Horizon Devices Precision Drive, for example, or anything that has got like a tightness knob that slices off the low end. One of my issues, though, if you want to call it an issue, with the GT-1000CORE versus the multitude of other amp modeling pedal board type things is that it doesn't have a model for the Horizon Devices Precision Drive. It also doesn't have a model for a Blues Breaker overdrive pedal. But there are several sort of generic Boss drives, clean drive, mid boost, treble, you know, and they're not necessarily models of anything specific. So one of my overall findings after several or over a year of using the GT-1000CORE, God, has it been 2 years already? I don't even remember. But is the fact that you kind of have to do your own tweaking and using a bunch of EQ blocks and everything like that, find your own sounds, and you can sort of match other pedals, which is what I've done. In my last video, I talked about matching the sound of the TR2 Tremolo from Boss as well as a MXR Carbon Copy Deluxe by using extra distortion blocks and EQ blocks and stuff like that on a parallel path, only affecting the effect, if that makes sense, to sort of emulate the tone coloration that those analog pedals provided, since there are no direct models of those within the GT-1000CORE. So you can mimic a lot of sounds with it, but it certainly doesn't have a capture like a IR device would have. You can't like capture the sound of a pedal that's in the loop, and so you have to kind of sit here and tweak knobs to mimic, and that's kind of what I've tried to do between the EVH and the GT-1000CORE. Anyway, you can see those settings. If we go over here and we go to Edit, Effects 1, we'll see that's on Clean Boost, Drive 18, Level 74. See level 74, now tone is on the next page here. Tone is at plus 30, bottom negative 32, bottom negative 32. I've just copied the settings over here. Now this is a lower sample rate. We're gonna, you might notice a little less clarity on the high end or something. But anyway, and then we, let's move over to the next block here, Effects 2, and it's a Parametric EQ. And sure enough, my next block here on the GT-1000CORE is also Parametric EQ. Which is a high gain at plus 2, level down 1 decibel, low mids at 250 hertz, and the Q is set to 1, and the gain is at 2 decibels. That should all be matched here. See what I'm saying? So basically high mid gain, again 1.25, 1.25, so it's all matched. So I'm using the same boost, same front end. I found that surprisingly the pre-filtering before the gain, even if you're using two completely different high gain preamps or whatever, that pre-filtering does a lot to shape the tone. So anywho, I've got those matched. Now, another thing that we're going to talk about is the speaker simulation. Now, I couldn't exactly match those two, and a lot of that difference in EQ, let's exit, let's see here. A lot of that's coming from just the different speaker cabs. The kind of crappy thing about the GT-1000CORE, although maybe that's part of why its latency is so low, is that you can't easily separate the cab simulations from the preamp models in the GT-1000CORE. So I wanted to compare the preamp sound on here and what I'm using, incidentally. Oh, wait, hold on. Hold up. Gotta go back to this one. What I'm using, let's see what amp I'm using, is the Maximum amp. This is a problem with the GT-1000. I see it as kind of a problem. A lot of their amps are just generic to Boss, and if you read the instruction manual to the GT-1000CORE, it'll be like, this amp replicates the modded sound of the 80s thing or whatever, but it doesn't really tell you which amp in particular it's modeling, because it's kind of their own original thing, even if it sounds really good. So I was looking for 5153 Blue Channel, which is pretty specific, because that is supposedly what this 5150 overdrive is voiced around. But they don't even have a 5150 in the GT-1000CORE. They've got amps where when you read their descriptions, it sounds like, well, that's kind of like a 5150, hot rodded thing, or brown sound, this or that, but I don't know, exactly is it supposed to be sounding like Eddie Van Halen's Variact Marshall head, or is it supposed to be sounding like a 5150 PV or whatever? So if you're looking for a modeler that has specific amp models in it, Like say you have a favorite few different amp heads and you want to, or combos or whatever, and you want to emulate them, you're not just going to find them in there and go, oh, yep, that sounds like it. There's a lot of these generic things like Maximum, for example. So, but I think the Maximum does sound pretty good. And the main thing I want to say in regards to latency, I've been watching a lot of Leo Gibson. You want to check out his channel, it's pretty cool. And he has for you a comparison chart of all the different latency of different modeling pedal boards. And what he's got there, he shows that, spoiler alert, the GT-1000, and I'm assuming therefore the GT-1000 Core, has the lowest latency of like a bunch of different modelers, including FM3 and all the Mooers and the Ampero hot tone, excuse me, and the Line 6 Helix and HX Stomp and all that. Of all of those, the GT-1000 Core has the lowest latency, which to me is important because I'm like hypersensitive to latency. Despite my horrible timing, I'm still hypersensitive to latency. So that's good. Now the Neural DSP Quad Cortex was not on his comparison chart. Still, that's a pretty awesome video and he's great. I recommend watching his channel. And so from that I gained some appreciation for the GT-1000 Core, super low latency. Maybe they achieve that by the way they do their AIRD modeling, but the downside is you cannot separate easily the cab from the preamp, or like the head of the amp. So I wasn't able to just like leave the speaker active on here and then turn off the Mooer radar and then hear this pedal, we can consider it like a preamp, through the speaker modeling on here. It's really difficult to do that. When I turn off the amp, this here, it also deactivates that speaker simulation. So the way they've done this is kind of, I mean, maybe it works well for, you know, if you're going to use this as your modeler, but there's not an easy separation between power amp cab and preamp model. It's all kind of one thing on here. So I kind of don't like that about the Boss, although, like I say, maybe that's how they achieve their ultra low latency and great feel, which it does have. So anyway, what I did the other day is I went back and forth and really tried to match these two things. Now, we go back to this guy here. Whoops, hold on. Haha, we're getting the double amp. Okay, so this is the EVH into the Mooer radar, and the only thing we're hearing from the GT-1000 is a tiny bit of reverb. That little reverb on there. Now watch this. You can drastically change the sound by changing the preset on the radar. And remember, the Mooer radar is power amp sim, which makes a huge difference. EQ, speaker, and microphone sim all going on at the same time. Let me turn up the volume a little. Okay. I mean, they're different, you know. Let's move back to this one. So I couldn't exactly match them despite all kind of EQ tweaks. Let's look at what's going on in here. First of all, this is now, again, we're back to the amp modeler on the GT-1000. And I'm going to turn off all the EQ blocks that I've got going on, including the pre-filtering. And this is the amp by itself. Not bad, you know, but one thing I noticed about the GT-1000 Core, specifically like in Leo Gibson's videos and a lot of people's comparison videos, is it seems to have a thinner sound comparison to the other modelers and a lot more high-end. But what I think partially that's responsible, it has a really high sample rate, and from what I've read online, it has internal oversampling, so it's for some of the stuff, so it's even like clearer. The high end particularly will have more samples per cycle of a waveform. You know, at 44.1 kilohertz, you get basically 2 sample points per oscillation at 22 kilohertz, for example, frequency. That's sure it's up at the upper range of human hearing, but harmonics can affect, you know, like 1 octave down. It can, they can. There's interplay there. So The high end is specifically really clear on here, but having a lot of clear high end in the overall balance makes it seem kind of thinner a bit, because there's like, in proportion, there's so much crystal clear highs. So I kind of EQ'd a bit of that out. Let's start with the pre-filters. Now this is really more to get the gain and response and attack and flubbiness taken out and everything. We're going to go ahead and we're going to add this one in, this EQ. Gives it a ton more body. It rolls off some of the highs, and then I put a grab. You can hear that, it kind of gives a little more mid-punch. Now it's not exactly the same, but like once I did that with those pre-filters, then I came back over here, I turned this guy off, and I copied the ones from there to here. And I'm finding that's sort of the process with the GT-1000CORE versus other modelers, is I'll put a device here and I'll try to mimic its sound with the GT-1000CORE, like manually capturing its tone, you know, matching the settings. And then I go back to here and adjust this to kind of whatever analog pedal or whatever I'm using. I try to match that to that one, to kind of get them as close as I can, and then you can really see what are the differences. You know, the feel is a bit different, but let's go ahead and switch back here. I think there's a little more clarity and definition on the GT-1000 with these current settings. This EVH is a little more raw. But there's something natural and I don't want to say spongy or saggy, because they're terms about power amp response, but there's just something a little more natural about the 5150 in a way. Obviously there's zero latency except from the Mooer. There's none from that being analog, but I have a hard time deciding. You know, maybe tell me down in them comments there which of these. It's kind of hard to decide. I feel like with the EVH, the Mooer radar, at least with the settings I currently have, there's kind of odd frequency peaks and scoops instead of being a more balanced frequency spectrum. And I think I've got that more balanced on the GT-1000CORE because there's all those EQs. I can bump a certain frequency like by 1 decibel here and there, and it, just to really get it like slightly tweaked, you know, where here. Let's check real quick how much this power amp sim is doing here. Here's the power. Turn it back on. One thing I noticed, the GT-1000CORE with the settings it has now is way more touch responsive and just easier to shred on, you know? And that's why I went back to preset 2 and used the boosts that are in here and set those up to match this one and turned that booster off. And it became more compressed in a way. Not that the transients sounded compressed, because I'm not actually using a compressor, but just when you have some soft clipping, it's slicing off the tops of the transients, so it overall it's going to feel compressed. Anyway, what do you think in them comments there? Which of these tones? Is that on? Yeah, it is. Okay. And lastly here, let's check out the two different radar settings with the EVH. Here we go on user preset 34. Let's go over here, 33. Let's do 33 versus the GT-1000. So 33 on the radar. To my ears, 34 sounds more like the GT-1000, but anyhow, let me know.